Hello and welcome back to the Aviators St. Helena podcast. My name is Kabir and I'm the head of the Aviators St. Helena. From 2020, all Airlink services to St. Helena and Ascension Island were suspended. But in March 2022, the island is now connected to Africa and the world once again. Today we'll be telling you about the details leading up to the resumption of services to the island by Airlink. This is the Aviators St. Helena podcast.
Before we talk about the logistics of preparing St. Helena Airport for the arrival of such a monumental flight, we need to give you some background info on Airlink and St. Helena's relationship. In 2016, in preparation for the grand opening of the airport, there was a debate about which airline would end up operating to the island from South Africa. Initially, British Airways, operated by former South African carrier Comair Limited, were going to fly from Joburg to St. Helena using their Boeing 737-800NG aircraft. This idea all went downhill after a challenging implementation flight. The wind shear became a real concern, and suddenly, after conducting some further research, Comair pulled out, citing that the island would never be a profitable destination due to the constraints from the wind shear.
Then came Airlink. At the time, it still had close ties to SAA and SA Express, and was under the brand name SA Airlink. They too had a good regional presence which would be sufficient to connect to St. Helena, but more importantly, the Embraer E190LRs were perfectly suited to operate the services. So with the help of an agreement with the St. Helena government, Airlink was ready to operate to the island. Since last operating to St. Helena in 2020, Airlink got rid of all ties with failed SAA and got a new brand image as completely independent. The privately owned regional airline made leaps and bounds with connecting Airlink customers across the globe with new advanced codeshares with Emirates, United Airlines, Qatar Airways, and more. Unfortunately, the interline agreements don't yet include St. Helena, and there's no timeline for this to be implemented. However, we can always hope that St. Helena will be included at some point in the future.
The resumption of scheduled flights between St. Helena and South Africa has required much planning and was complicated by the changes made by both governments in respect of ongoing COVID-19 pandemic protection and prevention measures. Nevertheless, Airlink aircraft are again a welcome sight at St. Helena, having been absent from the skies of St. Helena for 2 years. Their presence indicates some semblance of normality returning to this vital air route. So how do the logistics work in terms of resuming services? We are about to find out.
To ensure flights could operate to and from St. Helena, careful planning between Airlink, St. Helena government and St. Helena Airport was undertaken. This included ensuring that St. Helena Airport had access to the most recent Airlink flight operations manuals and other important documentation. As a result of changes in staffing at the airport, training for ground and support staff was undertaken to ensure that they were familiar with the Embraer E190 aircraft, which is operated by Airlink. Further training on the international booking system was also required for passenger service agents at the airport to refresh memories and to allow them to understand the changes made to these systems following Airlink's termination of its franchise agreement with South African Airways in 2020.
There also had to be liaising between St. Helena Airport and St. Helena government to ensure all COVID-19 protocols were taken seriously to protect the island. The departure and arrival procedures were adjusted accordingly to ensure that they effectively managed the level of threat from COVID-19 to the island. This required changes to arriving passenger procedures at St. Helena, including making the use of masks mandatory, maintaining an appropriate distance between arriving passengers and staff, and implementing specific measures designed to prevent the community spread of COVID-19 on the island.
Likewise, ground staff were given instructions on how to handle the arriving and departing Airlink aircraft from a COVID-19 protection perspective, ensuring they wore masks, sanitized and kept an appropriate distance from cabin crew. Ground servicing and passenger handling services agreements were reinitiated between Airlink and various entities on St. Helena to support the resumption of flights, and Airlink undertook a number of internal work streams to return the St. Helena air routes to their flight operations network.
Besides the coordination on the ground with the changes since the pandemic, some other changes needed to happen. For instance, a number of spare parts needed to be flown to St. Helena and Ascension Island when flights recommenced. This was due to the spares at both locations going out of specification or going beyond their validity date. Therefore, small parts and oils had to be swapped out, along with larger spares such as tires and jacks. So, what happens on the day of the flight? St. Helena Airport's compliance manager, James Kellett, is going to join us for this section of the episode from the island to answer this key question.
On a flight day itself, constant communication is maintained between Airlink operations, St. Helena Airport, and the pilots flying to St. Helena to ensure the airport is ready for the incoming flight. The weather conditions at the airport are communicated to the pilots before they leave Johannesburg, upon arrival at their fuel stop in Namibia, and just before the equal time point. The equal time point, which is also known as the point of no return, is a point on the flight where the aircraft is equidistant between Namibia and St. Helena. If the weather is predicted to worsen at St. Helena at the estimated time of arrival, a decision will be made just prior to the equal time point to determine whether to continue with the flight or whether to turn around and return to Johannesburg. Safety of flight is everyone's primary concern, so if the weather is likely to affect the possibility of a successful landing, the pilots will make a decision on whether it is safe to continue to the airport or whether it would be better to return to Johannesburg. This constant communication between the operations departments at Airlink and St. Helena Airport ensures flights are safe and are efficiently conducted. Upon arrival at St. Helena, arriving passengers and cargo are disembarked, and departing passengers, their luggage and cargo are loaded onto the aircraft for the return to Johannesburg. Again, Airlink and airport operations continue to maintain constant communication to ensure operations are seamless and are as smooth as possible for customers.
Thanks for that, James. So, on the 26th of March 2022, and just over 2 years since the last scheduled service to the island, Airlink resumed flights to St. Helena, leaving OR Tambo International Airport and flying to St. Helena via a fuel stop in Walvis Bay, Namibia.
Flights have initially resumed on a fortnightly basis in an effort to balance the need for air access to the island with the reality of lower passenger numbers, which have affected the global civil aviation industry. As passenger confidence builds and people start to return to the skies for regional and international travel, the flight frequency to St. Helena will return to pre-pandemic levels on the 8th of October 2022 with a return to one flight a week.
Although after the release of most, if not all, COVID-19 restrictions, the industry has seen a substantial surge in air travel, causing airports like London's Heathrow Airport telling airlines to stop selling tickets and cancel flights so that they can cope with the lack of staff since the pandemic. The announcement of American carriers United Airlines and Delta increasing capacity to SA supports the idea that the industry is taking off once again. Now that United and Airlink's new advanced partnership is in full swing, there's a chance that it might cause an influx of US tourists to the island and other Airlink regional destinations. But only time will tell.
The resumption of the air route for passengers and cargo from South Africa in March 2022 was welcomed by all and continues to provide an essential link for St. Helena and its sister island Ascension Island to the rest of the world. This has only been made possible by Airlink's determination to support St. Helena Island and its remote community.
Thanks very much to James Kellett and the St. Helena Airport Limited team for assisting us with the production of this video. There'll be many more St. Helena videos to come, but we also look forward to releasing the next documentary episode in the Aviator South Africa documentary series, The Storm Ahead, the journey of the South African aviation industry. So don't forget to subscribe, stay tuned, and happy flying.